period at the end as well if you have any questions, where I can unmute you if you'd like to ask that question live. But without further ado, let's get started and talk about why we're all here tonight. So we have Sarah from Marine Mammals of Maine. They're a nonprofit organization based in Brunswick, Maine, and they perform marine mammal rescue everywhere from Kittery up through mid-coast. And I won't tell you too much about it because that's what Sarah's here for. So without further ado, please welcome Sarah.
All right, thank you so much, Andrea. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I have some slides and then I have a video a little bit later. And I just want to reiterate what Andrea said. I am very happy to take questions during the session. I'm leaving time for questions at the end, but if there's something I'm talking about kind of during the presentation and you want to know more or you want me to clarify something, I'm really happy to take questions during the presentation as well. So don't feel like you have to save them for the end. So welcome. I am Sarah. I'm visiting you from Marine Mammals of Maine today. I'm an education volunteer with Marine Mammals of Maine, and I've been with them for about 3 years now, doing primarily this, visiting libraries and school groups and talking to folks in the community about what they can do to help Marine Mammals of Maine. So we have 4 different sort of core functions that we fulfill. Our primary function is response. So response kind of refers to if we get a call either from a citizen or a town official that there is a seal on the beach, our response team, whoever the response team for that particular town is, will visit that animal at the beach and assess its condition and kind of see what needs to happen with that animal. So that's sort of most of what we do. So we have 8 spots at our facility right now for response and care. So we haven't been around for that long. Marine Mammals of Maine got its start in 2012. And at that time, we were only able to do response and transport because we didn't actually have a facility of our own. So we were transporting animals all the way down to Massachusetts, which is the next closest care facility. So if there was an animal that we responded to that needed to be taken in and cared for, we would have to transport it down to Massachusetts. And that was not ideal because, when we're picking up animals, they are obviously, not in very good condition, or else we wouldn't be picking them up for care in the first place. And so a lot of them were just not surviving that transport down to Massachusetts because they were already in pretty tough shape when we were picking them up. And so we ended up getting our start with care with triage services. And that means that we would bring them to our facility and we only had a license from the state of Maine to keep them for 72 hours. And so what we would do during those 72 hours is let them rest as much as possible, get them as hydrated as possible, and feed them if they were in a condition to be fed. And after that 72 hours of rest and hydration, we would then transport them down to Massachusetts if they needed longer term care. Just from being able to be triaged, we saw the survival rate go up to 100%. So 100% of the animals that we triaged were surviving that trip down to Massachusetts. So from there, we've grown to now having 8 licenses from the state to provide full care for the seals for as long as they need it. So that could be as short as a couple of weeks, all the way up to months if that's necessary. We had a prematurely born baby seal 2 summers ago who ended up being with us for 7 months because she kept getting infections and illnesses and really wasn't in a condition to be released for that long. So we can basically provide care for as long as the animal needs it. So that goes to our second core function, which is caring for up to 8 seals at a time at our facility. We also do a lot of research. We take biological samples from all of our animals and we provide that data to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It was our data that helped NOAA recognize a couple of summers ago, we were having a mass mortality event of seals, and it was our data that helped NOAA recognize that was a distemper outbreak. So we provide them with a lot of really valuable research data. And then we do a lot of education too, visiting school groups and libraries and community groups, talking about what people can do to help these seals and other animals they find on the beach.
And real quickly, we did get a question already, Sarah.
Sure, yep.
So, John and Eunice are wondering how the seal's gender is determined when they're found.
That's a really good question. So when it comes to a lot of marine mammals, we can't necessarily tell just by looking, because a lot of their genitalia is kept inside because they're in the very cold water for a lot of the time, and so it does have to be like a fairly close examination of that area to determine if it's a male or female. If they're adults, sometimes we can tell just by their size. So the adult males tend to be quite a bit larger than the adult females, but a lot of the ones we find on the beaches that need to be brought in for care are pups. And so we have to do a fairly close medical examination for that. Good question. So as Andrea alluded to before, we cover in terms of animals that we will go out and respond to on site and bring them back to our facility. We cover from Kittery all the way up to Rockland. And then north of Rockland is covered by an organization out of Bar Harbor called Allied Whale. And we actually have a seal in our facility now for care that Allied Whale brought to us. And so we'll have some pictures of that one later. But Allied Whale is kind of in the same position as we were a number of years ago, where they don't have their own rehab facility. They just do response and transport. So when anything north of Rockland, when Allied Whale responds to those animals on site, they end up bringing them down to us for long-term care. So what kinds of animals do we usually respond to and care for? So Marine Mammals of Maine is in the name, but out of all the marine mammals, we spend the vast majority of our time and resources on seals, because that's just the, what's most numerous and what we get phone calls about. So seals are in a class of marine mammals called pinnipeds, and that pinnipeds means flipper feet. And so the pinna part of that is the flipper. Pinna means flipper, and then the ped part means feet. So you put that together and you get pinnipeds, flipper feet, which kind of refers to the way that their upper appendages, what would on us be arms, and their lower appendages, what would on us be legs, are modified for swimming in the ocean. So they have that much more flipper capacity to be able to push the water. We see 4 different species of seals here in Maine. 2 of those species we see only in the wintertime because they are primarily Arctic species. And so here in Maine in the wintertime, it's cold enough for them to migrate down, and some of them will come down here and have their pups here. In the summer, it's too warm for them here. So we only see them here in the wintertime when it's colder. So one of those is the Harp Seal. So the Harp Seal is sort of your, if you picture an Arctic seal pup, that sort of pure white with the kind of, black eyes, black nose, super cute, laying on the ice, that is the Harp Seal. So we will sometimes get Harp Seals come down here and have their babies, and they love the snow. So if we get a Harp Seal pup in our facility, we have to bring in like loads and loads of snow into its enclosure for it, because they just love kind of rolling around in the snow. So they're called harp seals because as adults, they have a big black harp shape on their back. So this one we can tell from this picture is a juvenile because it's starting to get some black markings. It's not that pure white of the pup still, but its back is starting to darken. You can see it up there, but it doesn't have that fully black harp shape on its back yet. So this would be a juvenile harp seal. And then the other one we see around here in the wintertime is the hooded seal. We see less of these than the harp seal, but still some of them. So these are called hooded seals because you can see in the picture on the right-hand side there, the male's mating display is they have this big flap of skin in their nose, and like they take a deep breath in and then they push it out through their nose and it blows up this big sack of skin. And I guess if you're a female hooded seal, this is like extremely attractive because this is what the males do for mating displays. So that's why they are called the hooded seal. And again, this is one that is primarily an Arctic species, but will come down here in the wintertime to give birth because it's cold enough here in the wintertime. One of the two year-round species that we always see are the gray seals. And so these occur all over Maine, but primarily, I mean, if you've gone out, if you've like taken a ferry out to Monhegan Island, there's a lot of them that hang out off the coast up there, kind of in between the mainland and Monhegan. And we see more of them kind of in the mid-coast and north area, but we have them down in southern Maine as well. Gray seals, so I'll contrast them to the one we'll talk about next, our other year-round resident species, which is the harbor seal. Gray seals are quite a bit bigger than harbor seals, and they also have a much more elongated snout. So you can see it best when they're kind of in profile, but their face is a little bit more almost like horsey looking, like they have that really long snout, whereas the harbor seals have a little bit more of a stubbed snout. So they can be easy to confuse, especially from a distance, because they are both kind of a grayish color, but the gray seals are much larger, have that more elongated snout. And we have to be very careful with the gray seal babies. They can be very aggressive. So they're very defensive. They're, all baby seals are scared when we have them because they don't know that we're trying to help them. But the gray seal pups are particularly defensive. And then our final species, the second year-round species that we see a lot, are the harbor seals. These are the vast majority of our cases. The harbor seals are the most numerous in the state of Maine. So out of all the 4 seal species that I talked about, we have the most harbor seals. You can tell that this one is very newly born because they still have some umbilical cord attached here. So we see most of our responses are around this time of year, and they are for harbor seal pups that for one reason or another have been either abandoned by their mother or are sick and wouldn't survive even with their mother and need some care. So this time of year, kind of May and June, is the busiest time for us because that's when the harbor seals have their pups. So this is when we get the vast majority of our calls. I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but now, like up until now, sort of late April, early May, the calls we get tend to be for prematurely born harbor seal pups. So every year we end up taking in maybe 4 or 5 preemies, prematurely born pups, who would definitely not survive on their own. And there's very easy ways that we can tell that a seal pup was born prematurely that I'll talk about a little bit later. So I want to talk about some of the adaptations that seals have to living in the water around here and anywhere else that they are found, and also sort of why some of those adaptations lead to pups being alone on the beach where, people may think they've been abandoned. In some cases they have, in some cases they haven't. So a couple things that we can see here. So this is a baby seal pup that is in our care at our facility. And you'll notice that they're only in the water, like kind of partway up their body. We need to get them used to being in water and moving around in water. But as pups, they don't have the physical resources, mainly in the form of blubber, to be able to survive for a really long time in cold water. So this is a primary reason why mother seals will leave their pups on the beach and go off to hunt. So, she needs to go off to hunt to have enough resources, to have enough food for herself, to produce milk for her pups. So she needs to be able to go hunt, but she may be off hunting for 3 or 4 hours at a time. And the baby just doesn't have the blubber resources yet to survive that long in the cold water. So they cannot be in the water for that 3 or 4 hours at a time. So the mother will leave the pup on a beach or on a rock or somewhere up out of the water, go off and hunt, and then come back for her baby. So it's not uncommon at all to see a baby seal on their own on the beach, and it doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong. It could just mean that the mom is off hunting. But that means that, when the pups are still quite young and before they've really started to gain a lot of weight yet, we can only do supervised swim time with them. So we'll give them, a little bit of time in the water, making sure we're monitoring them closely that whole time, and then, remove them so that they're not getting too cold in the water for too long of a time. A couple of other really cool adaptations that seals have. One of the most prominent things you can see in this picture are their whiskers. And so they use whiskers a little bit differently than some of the land mammals that you might be used to. So, your dog has whiskers, your cat has whiskers. A lot of our kind of land mammals have whiskers that they use to maybe feel around their surroundings, feel, cats use them a lot because they're nocturnal, and also kind of like being in small spaces. And so they use that to kind of feel out the dimensions of the spaces that they're in. Seals do this extremely cool thing with their whiskers, which is they are, spending a lot of time underwater hunting for fish. These fish are like moving around really rapidly. And so at the same time, it may be a little bit dimmer underwater, if the water's murky, or if they're, somewhere where the light isn't penetrating down quite as far as they are. So those whiskers are actually sensitive enough to pick up the movements of the water made by the fish as they're swimming, which is like mind blowing. It's amazing. I've known that for years, and it's still, every time I talk about it, I think it's the coolest thing. So their whiskers are about 100 times more sensitive than a cat's, for example, because they are using those to feel the currents from the fish swimming in the water. And then another major difference between land mammals and marine mammals, you can see if you look at the seal's nose up here, its nostrils are closed by default. So their resting state of their nostrils without having to make any muscle movements is closed. So that when they're underwater, their nostrils are closed, they're not getting water up their nose, and they don't have to expend any muscle energy in order to keep them that way. Instead, when they're up on land, they actually have to flex their face muscles to open their nostrils if they want to breathe through their nose. So it's kind of, again, something that's a little bit opposite from land mammals that really helps them be adapted to living well in the water. So I do want to touch on cetaceans just a little bit because they are marine mammals and they're ones that we respond to. We just get far fewer calls about cetaceans than we do about seals. So cetaceans are your whales and dolphins and porpoises. We really have to respond very differently to cetaceans than we do to seals. So seals can be up out of the water for any length of time. They could spend days out of the water if they wanted to. It's not harmful for them to be out of the water at all. So when we're responding to a seal, our aim is not to bring it back into the water, because usually, seals come up out of the water to rest and also to get warm. If they spend too much time in the water, if they're getting cold, they can come up and lay in the sun and get warm. So we don't want to return a seal to the water that has chosen to be up on land. Cetaceans, on the other hand, they have a hard time being on land for any length of time because they're just larger and heavier, and their bodies are not meant to go back and forth. Their bodies don't have the adaptations to be able to go back and forth between land and ocean the way that seals do. So things like whales and dolphins, if they are on land for too long, the weight of their bodies actually can start to do damage to their organs. And so when we're responding to cetaceans, we do that very differently, where we're trying to, if they're still alive, we're trying to get them back into the water as much as we can. But oftentimes, when a cetacean strands, again, they don't have part of their normal behavior to come up on land the way that seals do. So when a cetacean strands, it's usually because it's either very sick, or something's gone wrong with its navigation system, or those cases don't tend to have as high of a success rate as the seals that we respond to. So I want to talk a little bit about what you should do if you find a stranded seal. So I'll just kind of go through these. You can kind of, if you're with somebody, if you're watching with someone, you can discuss these amongst yourselves. But I had made these slides to be kind of a yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing. But I'll just go through them since we're in webinar mode. So we like to talk a little bit about some do's and don'ts when it comes to if you see a seal on the beach, which is not out of the ordinary, especially at this time of year. In fact, we do have a seal in our facility right now being cared for that was found in Falmouth. And so it is definitely not out of the realm of possibility that you may see a seal on the beach when you're hanging out there. So one of the things we really want to do is keep the area quiet and minimize contact. Seals are very susceptible to stress, and they are very stressed out by close contact with humans. They don't know anything about us. They don't know that we don't mean them any harm. To them, we may very well be a predator. And so being close to humans can make the seal very stressed out. So you really want to make sure that you're kind of keeping back from that animal and keeping it in as low stress of an environment as possible. We talked a little bit before about how it's never, whenever we see a seal, it's never our aim to return it to the water. they do, it's part of their normal behavior to come out of the water to rest and to get warm. And so if that seal is choosing to be up out of the water, it's because it needs to either rest or get warm, and we don't want to interrupt that. Those are things that it needs to do for its health. So we're never thinking about returning it to the water if it has chosen to be up on land. We love if you can take on teaching others what to do. We've seen cases before where people have come to one of our presentations, and then a couple months later they encounter something like this, a seal on the beach, and they're able to educate the other people who are there about what the best way to treat that animal is. So that is great. We love to see when people do that. When it comes to keeping people and dogs out of sight of the animal, again, has to do with the seal stress response. We always want to keep it in as low stress an environment as possible. So that's a great thing. And especially, I want to say a quick word about dogs, because a lot of people walk their dogs on the beach. You may walk your dogs on the beach. Dogs and seals are closely related enough that they can actually pass diseases back and forth. And so when it comes to, like, if you let your dog go up to a seal on the beach, and that seal has some kind of infection like that, there was that big distemper outbreak among the seal population a couple summers ago, that can infect your dog, and vice versa. If your dog has any kind of illness, it can infect the seal. So we really like to see both people and dogs keeping a distance from seals. Pouring water on the animal, again, that's something that's going to make it cold if it has chosen to be up on land, and it's not really necessary. We see people doing that for cetaceans and sharks, and that's great. But a seal, that's not super necessary, and it might just make it cold if it has chosen to be up on land to try to get warm. This might seem like a no-brainer, but we see it happen. Pretty much any food that you would be eating, unless it's raw seafood, is not something that is going to be beneficial to the seal. So it does not need your Cheetos or your hamburger. Like, it'll be fine if we respond to it and bring it in. One of the first things we do, if it is in any condition for it, is to feed it. So the seal doesn't need your snack. We do like to be contacted right away, and I'm going to share our contact information at the very end on the last slide. So we respond at 24 hours a day to anywhere south of Rockland, and I'll share a few recent examples of seals that we've responded to, and situations where it would be excellent if people would give us a call. When I share the phone number at the end, I have that programmed right into my phone, so that if I do ever need to call, then I don't have to poke around the internet looking for the correct phone number. I just have it programmed into my contacts list. So a couple of recent seal exposures that have happened here in Maine. So the one on the top left here is at Old Orchard Beach. And so it's kind of hard to see. I'll come up to the annotation feature so I can maybe draw a little circle around it, but there is a baby seal right in the middle of that crowd of people right there. It's hard to see because so many people are all around it. This is not great for a couple of reasons. So, we talked before about how the seals are very susceptible to stress and can get really stressed out by a lot of people being around it. So if the seal is already, dehydrated or ill, or has, is not in some way in perfect health, then having that amount of stress from a lot of people being around it is only going to make its condition worse. Excuse me. So we like to keep it stressed down for that reason. And then there's another pretty major reason why we don't like to see a lot of people crowded around a baby seal on the beach like this, which is that we talked about how the mother will leave her baby on the beach to go off to hunt and then come back for it. If she comes back and she's kind of watching her seal from just offshore, in the water, and she sees all these people crowded around it, she's going to be too scared to come back up on the beach and retrieve her pup. And so this would end up being an abandonment case, because the mom is too scared by all of these people to come back up and get her baby. And so in an abandonment case, we do have to bring the seal in and care for it for as long as or until it's old enough to be released on its own. But, any wild animal's best chance is always in the wild with its own, with its own species and its own parents and stuff like that. So it's not the best case scenario for that animal to be abandoned and have to come to us instead. The one up on the upper right here, like we absolutely know that seals are super cute and people want to get pictures with them, but this is a situation where this would be extremely, extremely stressful for the animal, and would really exacerbate any health condition that it already has. The one on the lower left with the seal on the boogie board, again, these were very well-meaning people who, didn't know that seals can't be up or, can be up on the beach for any length of time. They don't have to be returned to the water. So they put the seal on the boogie board and wanted to return it to the water. We've had cases before where like people return a seal to the water and then we see it again, a couple hours later and it's in significantly worse condition, because it had to swim away. It couldn't get the rest it needed. It couldn't get the warmth that it needed. So this definitely is not a great situation for that seal. And then we do also see a lot of times some entanglement issues. And so you can see that this seal here is wrapped up in some old fishing net that's been kind of broken apart, or fishing line. And so even in a case like this, I mean, unless the animal is like actively choking, like it's, can't breathe, it's very visibly in some kind of respiratory distress, we like to have people call us for that instead of trying to help themselves, because a lot of times when animals get wrapped up in old fishing gear like this, it will dig into their skin and they'll end up with open wounds. And so when we respond to this animal, we wouldn't take the fishing line off right in the field like that. We would bring it back to our facility, take it off in a sterile environment where we could be cleaning the wounds as they came up. We would probably keep them in our facility for a couple weeks and kind of give some antibiotics, make sure those wounds didn't get infected, and then release the animal when they started to heal. So even in a case like that, we would much prefer to have us be the one to respond and help out, because we can do that in a sterile environment and give the animal the care that it needs. So this is what we will typically do instead. So if we get a call for a seal on the beach, our volunteers, whoever our volunteer team is that covers that town, will respond to that animal. They will do an assessment. They usually try to do it from fairly far away so that it doesn't get too stressed out, and do an assessment, maybe like through some binoculars or things like that, to see how that animal is doing. Our response volunteers are really highly trained in what to look for, whether an animal is sick or dehydrated. It's something that a lot of us who aren't trained like that can have a difficult time telling, but they can tell very quickly what kind of condition that animal is in. If they determine that it's healthy and everything's fine, they'll put up a sign like this that says, the seal is resting, we're monitoring it. And then they'll retreat to a safe distance so that the seal doesn't get too stressed out, and just monitor that seal until the mom comes back to pick it up. It's not until, if a seal has been abandoned for, 24 hours, that's when we might bring it in. And when I say retreat to a safe distance, it's federal law from the Marine Mammal Protection Act, from the 1970s, I think, that you have to be 150 feet back from any marine mammal that's up on the shore. And so when we say a safe distance or retreating to the legal distance, that is 150 feet, which is half of a football field, if that helps visualize it. So this is kind of in one slide, the same seal from rescue to release. And so this is a seal pup that we picked up a couple years ago. You'll notice that anytime that we are transporting a seal, even if it's in our own facility, so whether if we're taking it like from its pool back to its enclosure, we wrap them up in a little towel, because their claws are extremely sharp. And so they have these little claws at the end of their flippers. And, again, they don't know that we're not trying to hurt them. So they can get a little bit rowdy with those claws. So we keep them wrapped up for transport. And we just use, you can see what we use here. We use the same kind of, dog kennel that you might use to transport your dog to the vet. That's what we use if we need to pick up a seal and bring them back to our facility. They'll spend as long as they need to with us, again, anywhere up from a couple weeks to, many months, basically, however long they need to. And then we do a lot of releases up off of Popham Beach. It just tends to be a good location to release them. And And so you can keep an eye on, I'm going to share the URL to our website on that last slide. And so you can keep an eye on our Facebook page. They will announce if they do like a public release where anybody from the public can come. They like to do a couple of those a year. So if you're super interested, you can keep an eye on the Facebook page and keep an eye out for if they do a public release. But whenever we do a release, we're trying to interfere with that animal as little as possible. They usually just kind of open up the enclosures and stand back and let the animal take its time getting into the water kind of at its own speed. So I have a short video that I want to share with you. It kind of shows what one of the premature harbor seal pups journey is like. So this is a short video of a premature harbor seal that we had last year. Okay, so a few things that, oops, sorry. Okay, so a few things that you might have noticed in the video clip. There's well, you know what? I'll point out these features with a visual because my next segment is about our current patients, and like I said, one of them is a Falmouth seal. So there's a few things I wanted to point out from the video, but they're visible in our current patients pictures as well. So this is the one that is currently with us from Falmouth. One of the things that you see in the video, and that we have 3 of our 4 pups that we have with us right now also have this feature. They were prematurely born, and it's very easy to tell that by the color of their coat. So you might have noticed in the video that seal's coat was kind of like a light yellowish, kind of yellowish white color. And we see the same thing here with this seal. So that yellowish coat is actually a key indicator that the seal is premature, because that coat is usually shed in utero, and then they grow that gray coat before they're even born. So these baby seals actually have their first shed and regrowth of a new coat before they're even born. So when they are born with that yellowish white lanugo coat, which is what it's called, um, we can tell immediately that was a premature birth. And often those are animals that are going to need our care. A mother seal will sadly often abandon a premature birth, and so when we see them on the beach, they have most often been abandoned. And you can see this one that was found in Falmouth. Her little umbilical cord is still attached. So very lucky for her that we found her so quickly after she was born prematurely. But she's in our care now, and she's doing really great. Her energy is good. She really likes swimming. She's getting, she's eating well. She's, by all indications, very healthy. And so right now, we're just, whenever we are caring for these seal pups, it's really just about making sure they're at the proper weight to be able to be released. Like I was talking about before, they do need to build up that nice, fat, thick blubber layer to be able to survive in the cold water up here. So we like to see them be, about 100, 110, 120 pounds before we'll release them. So she's still got a long way to go, but she's in really good shape. This one was another premature birth, which you can kind of tell from her coat. This one was found, this is the one that was brought to us by Allied Whale. This COA acronym, that Allied Whale is up at College of the Atlantic in Bar Harbor. So that COA is College of the Atlantic. So this one was brought to us by Allied Whale from Lincolnville. This is another one that was prematurely born, but is in pretty good shape. This one, little number 36, came from Freeport. We give them numbers rather than names, by the way, so that we don't get too attached. It just, helps if, it's hard not to get attached anyway, but if we give them a name, it's game over. So this one was from Freeport. You can tell by, the picture in the upper left was when we collected him. And so you can tell by the coat there that he was not prematurely born. I think it looks a little bit like it in this picture. I think just we're seeing his like lighter belly fur, but we can tell from the darker back fur that this one was not prematurely born, but had been a maternal abandonment case up in Freeport. And then little number 37, he's a little preemie that's with us right now from Westport Island. And you can see again, this was a picture of him when we collected him. You can see how tiny he is, and that little white lanugo coat tells us that he was definitely a premature birth. So he's with us now as well, and he's also doing just fine. Actually, all of the 3 that were born premature, all but one has shed the lanugo coat and has their adult coat. So this is now all 4 of the 4 that I just talked about. Most recent picture just from a couple days ago that shows them all kind of hanging out and getting used to the water together, and they're all getting along really well together. And you can see the one in the middle here still has that lanugo coat, but the others have grown their pup coats already. So they're all doing great. They're all kind of learning how to swim and eating, and we're kind of graduate them to live fish as they get a little bit older, and we have to teach them how to hunt, but they're all in really good shape and just need to hang out with us and gain weight, learn how to hunt, and then they'll be off whenever they're ready. So this is, I have some information here on the last slide for you. So the phone number down at the bottom is the reporting hotline. So that's the one, if you want to take a minute and jot it down and put it in your phone later. I have this programmed into my speed dial so that that I can call if I need to. I've needed to call one time from Cape Elizabeth last summer. So it's good to have if you need it. And then our website is here, this MMoME.org. And then from there, you can find links to our Facebook and Instagram. And this is a really good way to keep up with whatever current patients we have. The care team is really good at updating Facebook a couple times a week with how all of our current patients are doing, any little updates about them, like if they've started to eat solid food yet. Like they really like to give a lot of updates. So if you like to hear a lot about how the seals in our care are doing, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and they do a lot of updates. And then this is also where you could hear about public releases if that's something that you might be interested in attending in the future. So I will keep this slide projected for a little while so you can write down that phone number and website if you want to, but I'm also really happy to take questions now.
All right, so this is Andrea here speaking up, and just to remind everyone, you can type in a question at the bottom of the screen in either the Q&A or the chat box. You can also raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll go ahead and unmute you so you can ask that live. But I did see that we had one come in. John and Eunice are wondering if there are any theories for the cause of premature births.
That is a good question, and not that I know of. I mean, I think just like humans, it's just something that happens. The harbor seal population in the state of Maine is very healthy. The harbor seal population in Maine is about 40,000. So, we see a handful of premature births a year. So just, out of that population, it's probably about what we would expect, just from, random, it kind of happening randomly, the same way that, for whatever reason, some humans are born prematurely as well. So as far as I know, there's nothing like no illness that might cause it or anything like that. It's just, something that randomly happens with any animal population.
Thank you, Sarah. And then we've got another question. This one comes from Helen, who asks, my 5-year-old is very interested in marine mammals. How can we get involved in the education portion of Marine Mammals of Maine?
Oh, that's a really great question. So there's a couple different things that you can do. Right now, we're not doing a ton where we actually go to, like we usually do these programs in person but now obviously nothing's in person. But another thing that we do a lot of when we're in person is attend like if there are what can I think of so any kind of events that happen, sometimes there's like a fair or a festival, we'll have like an information table there with information about what people can do and how they can help. So there are things like that, if you wanted to get in touch with our volunteer team, and actually probably what I'll do, I'll give you my own email address so you can contact me directly, and then I can kind of pass you through to our volunteer team. But that's one thing that you can do. And then another thing is that, we've had a lot of kids who are super interested in helping out, and they'll do something like, if they have like a birthday party or something, they'll have a donation drive for the seals and do like birthday presents for the seals. One of the things that we always need is more supplies. And so Marine Mammals of Maine has a Amazon wish list. And so that's something that's also linked on our website. And so people will do things like they'll have a birthday party, but instead of presents, they'll like ask for things for the seals, and then they'll, bring them up to the facility. So that's something that you could do. And, you can also get involved with your school community. So whether you're in, preschool or, kindergarten, first grade, whatever grade you're going to be heading into in the fall, you could talk to your class about it, or, see if your school wants to have us come visit and talk to your class about it, that kind of thing. So I'd be really happy to actually, probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop my email address right into the chat, and you can reach out to me directly, and I'll get you in touch with our volunteer team, and we can brainstorm some different things that you could do. Thank you. We really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Helen. And now we've got a couple more questions that have come in. So John and Eunice are wondering, when you're giving the seals formula, what is the formula used, and does it have a high fat content?
Yes, excellent question. It does have a very high fat content. We try to, anything, the formula gets made up. It's kind of a special marine mammal like rehab formula that rehab facilities use, and it basically tries to mimic the protein and fat and liquid composition of a mother seal's milk. So we want it to be as close as to what the seal would be getting in the wild. So I don't have the actual percentages that, I don't know off the top of my head what the actual percentages are, but they make it up so that it's like the same percent protein and same percent fat, and basically all the components of a mother seal's milk is what goes into that formula.
Awesome, thank you. And then from Josh, he's asking, what are the requirements to be a volunteer responder?
Excellent question. And like everyone wants to be a volunteer responder. So I will say, keep an eye on the Marine Mammals of Maine. Like if you follow them on Facebook, follow them on Instagram, they do. On the website, there's a form to fill out if you're interested in volunteering. You might not hear back right away. I actually, when I, years ago, when I filled out that form to help volunteer, it was probably like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months before I heard back, because what they do is like usually about twice a year, they have a big volunteer info session at their facility. And so they'll just email everybody who signed up within the past, 6 months or whatever, and say, hey, come on up to the facility. We're having a volunteer info session. So definitely fill out that form. That's kind of the way that they know who to contact in terms of who's interested. I will say, everyone who volunteers wants to be the one on the response team, right? Because that's just the most, fun. But often we have more than enough volunteers for things like response, and not enough volunteers for things like, education or fundraising or, working events, that kind of thing. So if you would love to help out, we would love to have any help that you could give. But just know that might be something other than response, because that's just something that like everyone wants to do. So our waiting list, there's actually a waiting list right now to be a response volunteer, just because like everyone wants to do it. So I'm extremely, extremely grateful that you're interested in helping out, and definitely fill out that form. And that will just be, the way that you can keep in touch with whatever opportunities are available.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And feel free, if anybody has any last minute questions, you can go ahead and type those in. But I did just want to say thank you so much to Sarah. Thank you to Marine Mammals of Maine, not only for this presentation, but for all the work that you do. It's really remarkable and really adorable. So thank you for sharing that with us. If anybody has questions after the fact, like Sarah said, she did put her email address into the chat box. So you've got that there. I'll see if that. Oh,
sorry, I realized I put it in, but only sent it to all panelists. So now I just changed it to all panelists and attendees. So if you didn't see my email address pop up before, you should see it now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm gonna have that on file here at the library. So if folks don't get a chance to jot it down, just let us know and I can get that information to you. Oh, and one last question came in. Sarah, what is the mortality rate for seals on the Maine coast?
Oh, good question. So a lot of that is difficult for us to know, because if they don't die on land, then we don't know. So like, a lot of times they'll either, they'll die out at sea, either from, just whatever, an old age or a disease or something like that, or they'll get eaten by a shark, which is, we have sharks here in southern Maine. And so we don't necessarily know the full mortality rate, because it's, most of them don't die up on land. Out of all the ones we respond to in any given year, we like to have people call us even if they see a seal deceased on the beach, because that's still, we collect that data. It's valuable data for us. We get probably 200 to 300 reports of deceased seals on the beach a year. And again, if you compare the harbor seal population in Maine right now is, 35 to 40,000. So whatever, 200 or 300 out of 40,000 is not many. But again, those are just the ones that die somewhere where someone finds them, right? So there's plenty of places along the Maine coast where aren't, the coastline isn't necessarily accessible to us, people walking. So we don't always know what that mortality rate is. But for something to give you kind of an idea, when we talked about that big distemper outbreak that happened a couple summers ago, that was what we consider to be a mass mortality event. Probably about 1,000 seals died of that distemper outbreak. And again, out of a total population of, 40,000. So that was a lot of seal deaths, but it wasn't harmful to the population in any way. There were still plenty of healthy seals left after that event. So really the mortality rate that we know of is not enormous. It's, we lose, they will be lost to infection or disease, to if they are injured in some way that doesn't let them hunt anymore, or, if they're preyed upon by a shark. So they don't have a ton of causes of mortality. And then I can see in the chat, we have another question. Oh, good. When do the pups start eating other food besides formula? Yes. So we start them off on formula, which is, again, what they'd be having with their mom. They actually, in the wild, they are weaned very quickly. They're only drinking their mom's milk for about 3 or 4 weeks. And so we have them on formula until about 3 or 4 weeks old. And then we switch them to, it's disgusting. We call it fish goo. It's fish pureed. It's like fish in a blender, and they get this like fish goo. And so they have that for a little while, and then we, not long, a couple weeks maybe, just to get them used to having something that tastes like fish. And then we graduate them after that, so that this is maybe when they're 6 weeks old. We will graduate them to eating full fish, but we've like stunned the fish. So, the fish are either stunned or dead, and we just put them in the water, and they find them in the water and eat them. And then once this is where it kind of diverges, and they kind of have to go on their own timeline. Once they're eating, either killed or stunned fish, once they can really reliably find that dead fish in the pool very quickly and eat it, that's when we'll start to put live fish in there. And they have to learn how to, chase and catch the fish on their own. And so that can be around 2 months old, again, depending on how quickly they learn how to really zero in on that dead fish. So from then on until they're ready to be released, we're giving them live fish in their pool to kind of teach them how to hunt. So it's a process. It's kind of a multi-step process, but usually by 2 or 3 months, they're eating live fish that they chase down themselves.
So you folks are really walking them right through,
Yes.
formula to being fully self-reliant in the wild.
Yes. Yeah. We definitely don't want to release them until we know for sure that they can chase down and hunt their own fish. And that, that it mirrors what their mom would do in the wild. It mirrors how she would teach them how to hunt for themselves.
Excellent. And you're already getting some thanks in the chat box. This absolutely was a fantastic talk. It's so informative. And again, it's a message that we can sort of share with our friends and relatives. Just back away from the seals and give Marine Mammals of Maine a call.
I love that. If those are the 2 takeaways, I love it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you so much again. And everyone, feel free to email with questions. And thank you all for coming tonight.
Yes, thank you all so much for taking the time to come tonight.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye.